The question for this week is, why was Hasidus held back in earlier generations? Wouldn't it have helped them as well? This is a question that's as old as Hasidus itself. The foundation of the question is a basic Jewish attitude, which is quite correct, that there is an inherent paranoia, there's an inherent aversion or fear to anything that is new. Because when something new emerges on the scene, the Jewish people's first reaction is, don't let anybody change anything about Torah. We're the timeless people with timeless faith because we hold on to our principles and don't let anything alter them. So when something new comes along, we instinctively resist it. And any new dimension of Torah, any new revelation of Torah that was distinctive had to, so to speak, get past that challenge, to be embraced and to recognize that even though it was new, it was actually ancient. It's part of the Torah. Just to give you one example of that, the Rambam. Rambam was an incredibly original person and one of the greatest contributors to Torah in the history of the Jewish people. And it took a very, very long time for people to get past that and to embrace Rambam as Rambam. And there's no question that Hasidus went through similar birth pains. So the fact that Hasidus appears so late in the day made it very difficult for Hasidus to be embraced. And of course there's two arguments. One argument is there's nothing new in Hasidus. Hasidus is simply saying the same things other Sifrei Musar are saying, just packaging it differently or calling it by a different name. Alternatively, who is Hasidus to make these changes? Now, Hasidus is new. I didn't make this up. The Rebbe says this in the Sichos. And of course, Hasidus is new not only in the ideas of Hasidus. Hasidus is new in the fact that it's a new koyach elokי. In other words, Hasidus is not just an intellectual body, it's a spiritual body with a powerful and holy energy. And the holy energy that's behind Hasidus is different than and deeper than the holy energies that brought into the world prior. In a word, Hasidus is Yechida, like the Rebbe says in his famous Sicha in Yana Shel Teres HaChasidus. And the way the Rebbe presents it actually is, in other words, what's the Rebbe's source that Hasidus is Yechida? Is Mischara Neida Mahusa, since the Baal Shem Tov was told, L'chesheyafutza mayanesecha chutza, k'as yimar dam alka Mashiach, that when Hasidus is disseminated, Mashiach will come. So Hasidus is connected to Mashiach, and it says in Kabbalah that Mashiach is Yechida, and by association, Hasidus is Yechida. Yechida is a whole nother level of Torah. It's an entirely different level of Torah. It's a higher level of Torah. It's a deeper level of Torah. And probably just as importantly, or perhaps even more importantly, it's a whole nother level of Avodah. So the novelty of Chassidus is not only in the ideas, although there are incredibly original ideas in Chassidus, but in the koyach that Chassidus brings into the world. This koyach was given to Holy Baal Shem Tov, and Toiv Ayin Hu Yavayrach, and the Baal Shem Tov shared it with all of us. So even though in many ways Chassidus looks like it's just the same old, because the form is similar in some aspects, or in many aspects, Chassidus is new. New in its ideas, and more importantly, new in its koyach, new in its ability to touch and inspire and lift up a yid. In what way is Hasidus new? What aspect of Hasidus, I think, most succinctly and accurately indicates the novelty of Hasidus? What makes Hasidus different than what came before? And the answer is, again, this is my understanding, in the centricity of the Jew, of the person. There's the Medrash, which Hasidus cites, that Eliyahu HaNavi acknowledges, Shnei Dvarim Kadmu La'elam Torah v'Yisrael, that the two things that precede all in Hashem's thoughts, so to speak, Torah and Neshamas Yisrael. And he says, Ein Yedei Mi Kadmu La'mi, I don't know which one should be before the other. And then he continues and he says, I look into the Torah, and the Torah is filled with Daber el B'nai Yisrael, Tzavez B'nai Yisrael, and Meir el B'nai Yisrael. And Eliyahu Hanavi says, Omer Ani, it is my opinion, Machshavt Anshe Yisrael Kodma L'chol Davar, the thought of the Jewish people precedes all, Afilu L'machshavas HaTorah, even the thought of Torah. This Medrash, I think, speaks to the very core and essence of Chassidus, because what the Medrash is saying is that the center of gravity, the essence of what is Judaism, is not Judaism, but the Jew. In other words, it's not that we're Yidden, because we practice Judaism, we're Jewish, but because we're Jewish, we practice Judaism. And the beginning is the Yid. This is a radical change in the definition of Judaism, that the centricity is on the person. And of course, the manifestation of this is the extreme philosophy of Chassidus as far as the V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. That it's a Torah of Avos Yisrael. It's a Torah of seeing the good in every Jew, seeing how a Jew exists in a place, in Machshava Gduma Da'ak, where there's no such thing as a bad Jew, and so forth and so on. This lies at the very heart, at the very core of Chassidus. And from this kernel radiates not just a new Torah, but a new Avodah. And not only a new Avodah that relates to our relationship with other people, but even our relationship with ourselves. Because what emerges from this philosophy is the idea that even when a Jew is relating to himself, he needs to understand that everything he needs in order to succeed as a Jew is inside him. He doesn't have to learn it and take it from outside of himself. He has to find it inside himself. He has to draw out his neshama. That's to some extent even explained in the Tanya, how a Yid accesses his inner self and uses it as a motivation for Avodas Hashem. So these are some thoughts about the novelty of Chassidus. And of course, there's so much more to say. As a Chassid in our generation, of course, we would add very emphatically that Chassidus is about Tachtonim, about bringing Hashem into the actual world, into the real world. This novel idea is also, even though it's a Medrash, it's been around for thousands of years, Chassidus has not only emphasized this Medrash and interpreted this Medrash, but actualized this Medrash. Or to say it more mystically, it's given the power, given the koyach of Yechida to see this message through. Now, I spoke about Chassidus now for 7 minutes, almost 8, and I haven't answered the question. I'll do that next week in Mitzvah.